Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Welcome to the Westminster Town Hall Forum, or at least the music before the forum. I'm Tim Hart Anderson, the senior minister here at Westminster Presbyterian Church and moderator of today's forum with Dr. Lisa Schulte Moore. Before we get to Dr. Schulte Moore, we're going to have some wonderful music here from our own homegrown Cantus. Cantus is a Twin Cities-based men's ensemble. Resident here at Westminster, by the way. We get to hear them all the time in our halls. They perform across the country. The Washington Post describes them as having a sound that is both exalting finesse and expressive power. And they also refer to the spontaneous grace of the music that we're about to hear. Cantus is in its 27th season, and it's going to begin a series of hometown performances around the cities, beginning tonight here in Westminster Hall. And you can learn more about these upcoming performances at cantussings.org. And they do sing. Ladies and gentlemen, join me in welcoming Cantus to Westminster Town Hall Forum.
Ezekiel saw the wheel way up in the middle of the air. Ezekiel saw the wheel way in the middle of the air. The big wheel run by faith, and the little wheel run by the grace of God. 'Tis a wheel in a wheel way in the middle of the air. Some go to church for to sing and shout way in the middle of the air. Before 6 months days all turned out way in the middle of the air. Ezekiel saw that wheel way up in the middle of the air. Ezekiel saw that wheel way in the middle of the air. The big wheel run by faith, and the little wheel run by the grace of God. 'Tis a wheel in a wheel way in the middle of the air.
If religion were a thing that money could buy,
way in the middle of the air, the rich would live, and the poor would die. Way in the middle of the air. Ezekiel saw that wheel way up in the middle of the air. Ezekiel saw that wheel way in the middle of the air. The big wheel run by faith, and the little wheel run by the grace of God. 'Tis a wheel in a wheel, way in the middle of the air, way in the middle of the air, way in the middle of the air.
very much. As was mentioned, we are Cantus, and we're very, very excited to be a part of the Westminster Town Hall Forum. The music that you'll hear today is a small subset of a larger performance that we actually start this evening, A New World, here in Westminster Hall. Actually, we did reach capacity in Westminster Hall, but if you wanted to see the live stream at 7:30, please do visit www.cantussings.org to take a peek at online tickets. And also on Sunday, we'll be at the Capri Theater, so if you just can't get enough, we'll be there. So the music today is kind of a collection of songs from composers that really do span the globe, but there's this web of connection that we explore in tonight's concert that connects all of the music and musicians that you hear. We'll have compositional giants from the Czech Republic, actually, Antonin Dvorak and Leos Janáček, two huge composers of the Czech world. And then we cross the Atlantic, getting us over to the Americas, and you hear wonderful works by H.T. Burleigh, Margaret Bonds, and Florence Price as well. We hope you enjoy our selection today, and we hope to see you at A New World.
Ora Diversitatem linguarum cuntarum gentes in unitate fidei congregasti. My life is a pathway of sorrow. I struggled and toiled in the sun, with hope that the dawn of tomorrow would break on a work that is done. My master has pointed the way. He taught me in prayer to say, Lord, give us this day and our daily bread. I hunger, yet I shall be fed. My feet, they are wounded and dragging. My body is tortured with pain. My heart is shattered and flagging. What matter if heaven I gain? Of happiness once I have tasted, 'twas only an instant it paused, though brief was the hour that I wasted, forever the woe that it caused. I'm tired and want to go home. My mother and sister are there. They're waiting for me to come, where mansions are bright and Heaven is the place where happiness is everywhere. Happiness is everywhere. Sing, sing, sing.
Animals and birds sing.
Sing, 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 sing.
Sing.
As does everything, everything, everything,
Animals and birds sing.
happiness is everywhere. To each stone, how do you do?
Stone answers back well.
Well, 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 and you? He glides so swiftly back into the grass. 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 He glides so swiftly back into the grass.
He glides,
The grass.
he glides.
He glides so swiftly through the grass. He glides so swiftly through the grass. He gives me the courtesy of ashamed to seek a stone, to seek a stone, to seek
A stone,
a stone,
to seek,
to seek a stone, a stone, a stone, a stone, a stone to kill him.
The song was about a snake. The song was about a snake.
Oh, fields of wonder, fields of wonder, fields of wonder.
Wonder,
Oh, fields of wonder, fields of wonder, fields of wonder, out of which stars are born, out of which stars are born, and moon and sun and thee as well, and me as well, and me as well. Like stroke of lightning, like stroke of lightning in the night, some mark to make, some word to tell. Stroke of lightning, some mark to make, some word to tell. Stroke of lightning, some mark to make, some mark to make, some word to tell, some word to tell.
Thank you so much for having us. Thank you for being a great audience. It's great to be here performing for you. But we have one last song that we would like to share with all of you. And this song was a very recent addition to all our programs. And the reason we decided to add it is because of everything that is happening in the world right now, and especially the war in Ukraine. We wanted to pay homage to those who have stayed home to defend their country, but also to those who have made the impossible decision to leave everything they knew behind just to survive. So this is the Ukrainian national anthem.
Shemene
Oh, you're over here. And I'll be over here. Greetings and welcome to the Westminster Town Hall Forum. Before we go any further, please join me in thanking Cantus. I hope they can step back out. We'll be listening to you in upcoming concerts, right? Cantusings.org. And on Sunday here, that's right. Thank you, Samuel. Right here in the sanctuary. My name is Tim Hart Anderson. I'm the senior minister here at Westminster Presbyterian Church, located on Nicollet Mall in beautiful downtown Minneapolis. I'm the moderator of the forum. Thank you all for observing the mask mandate, which we still have here. Cantus was tested within the 24 hours and all negative, and thus they could take their masks off, and we all test too. But I think changes are coming soon. Yay? Right. With the really positive, well, good numbers. They're not positive, they're going negative. So it's hard to say that. Anyway, we're very pleased to welcome from neighboring state, Iowa, Dr. Lisa Schulte Moore as our speaker today to the forum. We have been doing this, the forum, for more than 40 years, 42 years. We've invited speakers of conscience to address issues of the day from an ethical perspective. And this is the third program in this season of 5 programs on climate change. We have had 3 now with Dr. Schulte Moore, and then 2 more women on the forefront of climate science and solutions speaking this spring on the matter of how we as a community, as a nation, as a world can do something substantive about climate change. Together, these women are showing us ways that climate change can be altered in its course. And these programs are focusing on solutions, not just the doom scenario, but how we can work together to alter climate change, and we're grateful for that. You know, we're especially pleased to be addressing issues of concern to rural Minnesota. We often seem to be talking about things that are of more concern maybe to the cities or to an urban audience, but the forum reaches the whole state. And this is an agricultural state. This is a really good topic for us to be talking about here. I was in Winona 2 weeks ago and met a couple people. They said, well, we listen to the forum down here in rural Minnesota too. So to those of you in Winona and elsewhere in this state, in the rural areas, thank you for being part of this forum today. This season is presented with the McKnight Foundation support. McKnight is a family foundation based in Minnesota. McKnight advances a more just, creative, and abundant future where people and planet thrive. We invite you to visit our website, westminsterforum.org, to watch the past forums and to see a list of upcoming programs. Forums are made possible because of us, because of individual supporters, contributions from individuals such as those gathered here or listening to us. Our largest source of funding. Your support in any amount powers these programs and keeps these conversations going. Please consider supporting the forum. For those of you here, there are donation envelopes in the material you have. Drop those off on your way out if you would, please. And if you're watching live stream, you can go to westminsterforum.org, donate to make a gift to the forum. Thanks to Minnesota Public Radio today, we're recording and they're broadcasting all of these 5 talks on climate change. The entire series will be presented on NPR in a special week of programs. You'll be able to hear today's talk along with the rest of our spring season at noon every day of the week of April 25th, at noon the week of April 25th. You can always watch or listen to our programs live on the Town Hall Forum website or on our Facebook page. And we want to thank, as always, our media sponsors for the forum, MinPost, which is a source of nonpartisan news coverage of Minnesota and beyond, minpost.com, and also the Sahan Journal, S-A-H-A-N, Sahan Journal, covering issues affecting Minnesota immigrants and communities of color, sahanjournal.com. In the second half of today's program, Dr. Schulte Moore will be taking questions from the audience. Those of you here in the sanctuary want to note your question on that card you were given as you came in. And we will attempt to answer as many of those as possible after the break when the ushers come forward to receive them. And if you're watching online, please put into the chat feature of the live stream whatever question you might have, and we will try to address them as well. Now it is my pleasure to introduce today's Westminster Town Hall Forum speaker. Lisa Schulte Moore is a professor of natural resources, ecology, and management, and associate director of the Bioeconomy Institute at Iowa State University in Ames. Much of her work is in collaboration with farmers to build more sustainable and resilient agricultural systems. She's the co-founder of the science-based Trials of Row Crops Integrated with Prairie Strips project. The acronym is STRIPS, which developed the Prairie Strips conservation practice. She was a lead developer of the People in Ecosystems and Watershed Integration project, which helps people understand human impacts on the environment and improve the management of natural resources. She works with the USDA, National Institute for Food and Sustainable Agricultural Systems. And in 2021, Dr. Schulte Moore was named a MacArthur Genius Fellow. In their announcement of this award, the MacArthur Foundation heralded her work saying, quote, "By approaching the serious challenge of food security, climate change, and conservation of our environment as networked pieces of a larger system, Schulte Moore opens new possibilities for a transformation in sustainable agriculture." It is an honor for the Westminster Town Hall Forum to be speaking about issues that affect all of us, including in rural Minnesota. Please join me in welcoming to the Westminster Town Hall Forum, Lisa Schulte Moore.
All right. Well, hello, Minnesota. It's really an honor to be here at this church, Westminster Presbyterian Church. It's an amazing place, and it's got such an amazing vibe. And to be in the middle of downtown Minneapolis, bustling urban location. But while I'm really excited and honored to be here, over the next hour, what I'd really like to do is to bring you to someplace else. To bring you to someplace that's rural instead of urban. To bring you to someplace where there's a whole lot of corn and soybeans, and where there's grain elevators and storage bins. And there's probably a river, a stream running through this place, and it's pretty dirty. And the small town, sleepy small town, is quieter than it used to be. And there's very few young people there today. But the people there have a lot of pride. They love this place, it's home. And they're people that are honest with each other and willing to share their time, their resources, their labor. They'll give their neighbors several days' work if they're in need of help. And they like this place. They like the corn and soybeans because that's what pays the bills. I'm Lisa Schulte Moore, and I'm an interdisciplinary scientist who studies human landscape interactions in rural Midwestern settings, like the one I just described. With students and colleagues from various disciplines, I conduct research to help create new knowledge and tools that reflect what people want, to show what's actually possible, and to try to lower barriers toward more positive change for people today and in the future. Like many Midwesterners, my own connections with rural areas are familial and rooted in place. While I grew up in town, Eau Claire, Wisconsin, my family farm near Strum, Wisconsin, is the location of some of my fondest childhood memories, and a place that my family now co-owns with my sister's family. While I focused on forest landscapes of the Great Lakes region early on in my career, including forests of Minnesota, for the last almost 2 decades, while I've been at Iowa State University, I've been living, breathing, learning about agriculture, and I am hooked. By its people, by its bounty, and by its challenges. I've found that my background as a data-driven, middle-aged, middle-income, middle-of-the-road Midwesterner has allowed me to build bridges among communities who tend to otherwise be isolated in our polarized world. What I hear from farmers and rural residents through this work is that their journey, it begins, it continues, and ends with people and the land. And that's the first major point I have for you today. The agricultural landscape for these people is home. They share stories of their farms, their heritage, the communities that they belong to, crops and water, their churches, and the schools that are no longer there. The annual cycle of agriculture, and now also about prairie. They talk about how proud they are of the productivity associated with Midwestern agriculture, but that it doesn't require many people in rural areas to make it go. They mourn the loss of their neighbors' farms. Each year there seems to be fewer, while coveting their neighbors' land. They are concerned that in so many ways, it appears we are trading off long-term sustainability, prosperity of our children's and grandchildren's futures for short-term production, profits, and ease of living. In other words, the way we practice agriculture, it may make dollars, but it doesn't make sense. And farmers and rural residents feel like it shouldn't. It doesn't have to be that way. They think if we're really smart, if we innovate and are open to change, that if we could work together, we can rearrange our agriculture to produce the full basket of goods and services that society is asking for. We should be able to create more wealth and prosperity for people in the near term while safeguarding our farms and our children's future. But how? But how? For me, as a landscape ecologist, when I start a dialogue with a farmer, I've learned to start that conversation with soil. Healthy, fertile soil. Ways to value it, ways to protect it, ways to regenerate it. Why? Because it's something we agree is important. And in our fractured, polarized world today, it's so hard to center hard conversations like ones about agriculture and climate change on the points where we agree. That way, we do less finger pointing, and we all know that that's not especially helpful, especially when people are struggling. And that way, we can create shared bonds. We can develop understanding and empathy. And from there, we can start working together on small things, see some success, build a track record, and the trust needed for us to work on much, much larger things. And we all know there's some pretty large things we need to work on. So what about you? Why should you care about farmers and soil? Well, because we all need to eat. It's really that simple. As farmer, writer, and activist Wendell Berry states, eating is an agricultural act. Yet for so many of us who live in the US and other developed countries, agricultural abundance is so ubiquitous that it's easy for us to forget that food doesn't just simply come from a grocery store. As a result, we too often take for granted the climate, the fact that we get enough rain here, the soil, the water, the nutrients, the livestock, and the people required to provide us with our daily sustenance. We are all part of the circle of life that today is nourished through agriculture. And I think you probably already know that all is not right today with agriculture. In many places, yes, and also right here in the Midwest. Let's face it, there's some pretty big things we need to work on. Heaven help us. The worst part is that we've seen this before, and we know where it might take us. I'm sure most of you are familiar with the Dust Bowl of the 1930s. You can recall the images of billowing dark clouds swallowing up small rural farming communities. The Dust Bowl is what happens when abused soils meet a climate disruption, like an intense drought. Its impacts were so severe, it led President Franklin Delano Roosevelt to lament, "A nation that destroys its soil, destroys itself." He was right about that then, and he'd be right about that again today in 2022. So the question is, what do we need to do differently? The USDA, U.S. Department of Agriculture, defines soil health as the continued capacity of soil to function as a vital living ecosystem that sustains plants, animals, and humans. Which brings us to our second key takeaway from today. Healthy soils not only provide food, but they benefit all our environment. For example, healthy soils require less fertilizer. They harness biology to fuel productivity and improve food's nutritional value. They filter nutrients and harmful bacteria out of water, keeping water clean and safe for drinking and recreation. They provide habitat for the multitude of organisms that create soil biodiversity, including fungi, bacteria, insects, and mammals, some of which we don't even have names for yet. And what about climate change? Soil can help us mitigate climate change by storing carbon that's been removed from the atmosphere through photosynthesis by plants. Healthy soil helps us adapt to climate change by making us more resilient to drought and by acting like a sponge during heavy rainfalls, holding water in place and reducing downstream flooding. The Nature Conservancy, one of the world's largest conservation organizations, sums it up this way: soil health is inextricably linked to broader conservation goals. Most farmers already employ one or more soil health practices within their fields. Farmers can apply all 5 of the U.S. Department of Agriculture's soil health practices by 1, minimizing soil disturbance, so reducing tillage, armoring the soil with crop residues, maintaining continuous living cover, diversifying the plantings, and integrating livestock. For farmers to consistently apply all 5 of those, that's really hard. And in order for them to do that, we need to make some pretty significant changes in our agricultural systems. Of these, the middle one, maintaining continuous living cover, is where I've focused my career. Why? Because healthy soil needs to be protected from the elements through all seasons. Also, healthy soils are full of life, and life underground, just like life above it, needs to be fed, watered, and cared for. There's a great organization in my home state, Practical Farmers of Iowa, which is a farmer-led nonprofit. It equips farmers to build resilient farms and communities. Their mantra is, "Don't farm naked," which is a real catchy way of visualizing continuous living cover, right? Plants provide a jacket that protects soil from exposure to heat, cold, wind, and driving rains. They also form soil's pantry, consuming only part of the energy they harness through photosynthesis, leaving the leftovers to nourish fungi, bacteria, and animals in the soil. Just like people, soils do better with a diverse and balanced diet, whether it comes through crop or livestock diversity. Livestock are important as a way to move about beneficial soil microbes, replenishing them in areas where they may have been lost, and are key to soil health. All of these steps get us moving on an important path. We need not only to protect the healthy soils we have left, however, we also are at a point where we need to start rejuvenating the soils that have been depleted. Which brings me to regenerative agriculture. The idea that soil can not only be sustained, but also rejuvenated within a productive and a profitable farming operation. That is the core of the regenerative agricultural movement. While the concept is not new, mainstreaming it is. You can now find information about regenerative agriculture in widely accessible books, like David Montgomery's Growing a Revolution, Bringing Our Soils Back to Life, or by Minnesota's own Brian DeVore, a book called Wildly Successful Farming, or on Minnesota Public Radio, the Fieldwork podcast, and even in a feature-length Hollywood film, Kiss the Ground. As these resources detail, reasons for the movement are diverse and sometimes profound. You see, there's no cookie-cutter recipe for regenerative farming, and that's part of the lure. Farmers with farms of all sizes, from small to large, talk about how their efforts to become regenerative have made farming interesting again. They each need to determine the right mix of practices that work not only for their operation, whether it's fruit, vegetable, grass, or grain, dairy, beef, poultry, pork, organic, or not. They need to figure out how to balance the short-term productivity with building soils over the long term, given the natural, the financial, the community, and other resources available to them. What does regenerative agriculture look like? I'd like for you to imagine 3 different farms with me. The first farm is primarily a grass-based cattle operation that also produces some corn, soybeans, and small grains. The farmer is also thinking about adding an apple orchard for cider apples. While the farmer doesn't farm organically, he is judicious in his application of chemical fertilizers and pesticides, preferring the more natural tools of continuous living plant cover, as well as disturbances like grazing and fire to cycle nutrients and control pests. He employs prairie strips, patches of reconstructed native vegetation interlaced within the croplands, which have been shown to dramatically reduce soil erosion, improve water quality, and provide wildlife habitat, with impacts on grain yield that are proportionate to the amount of land taken out of production. The farmer finds his inspiration in nature and also manages native prairie and forests on his property. A neighbor helps him manage the native cover with meat goats, a market for which has been developed in a nearby city that has a growing population of immigrants. Deer and pheasant hunting leases help him pay for the additional costs associated with the conservation on his farm, including cover crops, prairie strips, and farm ponds. One night, my family camped out on by a pond on this farm. It was so loud with life, frogs, toads, crickets, owls, coyotes, we literally could not sleep. The second farm is diverse now, but it wasn't always that way. 15 years ago, when the husband and wife team first took over farm management from the previous generation, they grew corn using full tillage soil management as feed for hogs raised in a conventional market. Over time, they transitioned to no or low-till cropping systems with longer rotations to reduce costs and increasing the diversity of their crops, including soybeans, cover crops, oats, alfalfa hay, and adding cattle. They did this for soil health, but also because both members of the couple wanted to be employed full-time on the farm. They needed more revenue streams to make that pencil out financially. Their beef is processed by a local small butchery in their small town and direct marketed mostly to people in their community. Their farm is now financially and environmentally resilient. The cattle in particular add value by turning cover crops into a sellable product and improving the soil health with their manure. The couple is now regularly tapped to provide input on how state-level agricultural policies can better support family farms. The third farm raises corn, soybeans, wheat, rye, and cattle, and also generates renewable electricity. Environmental stewardship is a family ethic on this farm, and they center the land's topography by cropping on the contour, using no-till or strip-till farming methods. They also incorporate terraces, grassed waterways, and grassy field borders where needed to protect soil, water, and provide habitat for wildlife. In 2009, the farmer and couple wanted to expand their beef cattle feedlot to improve family farm finances, but they were concerned about the impacts on soil health, on their carbon footprint, and on water quality. Their solution was to redesign their entire farm system around a concept of circularity, with the outputs of one component of the farm providing inputs to another. The key in this effort was the addition of 2 biodigesters, large tanks in which manure and soil bedding from their cattle is mixed with biomass from crops. As a result, there is no strong manure smell on this farm. Microbes then convert these materials into biomethane gas, which is burned to produce energy for the farm and the local community. They use the material that remains as a biofertilizer and have eliminated nearly all of the purchased synthetic nitrogen fertilizer from their operation. These practices are not only soil smart, but they are also climate smart. And now there's 7 full-time jobs on this farm. Grass-based livestock production and agrotourism, integrating diversity and connecting with the local market, circularity. These are just 3 models of producing food, of farmers learning to regenerate their soil, of people who care deeply about the impacts of our climate, our water, and our wildlife. They see improving these things as central to improving their own prosperity and supporting the community around them. Wouldn't you like to know that your food comes from farms like these? My vision for agriculture is farms like these comprise the norm rather than the exception, but getting there is going to be a lot of work. As eaters, we need to better support farmers in regenerative agriculture, because if farms like this can't quantify their impacts, can't continuously improve, can't turn positive outcomes into profits, then they will wink off the map, like so many others that have gone before, even in recent decades. For example, the percentage of farms in Iowa is down 60% since World War II. In Minnesota, it's down 64%. Think about it. That is within many farmers' lifetimes. So let's quickly recap. 1, rural communities are rooted in people in the land. 2, we all need healthy soils. Healthy soils are key to healthy food production while also regenerating a better environment. 3, keeping soils healthy means keeping them covered. And 4, we need significantly more support for farmers working to regenerate their farms, their soil, their farms, and their farming communities. Again, the question is, how? Well, regenerative farming is more complicated than farming systems that currently dominate the Midwest, so change is going to take some coordination, and there are 3 crucial pieces to scaling up. First, we need supportive farming communities. Just like most people, farmers prefer to learn from others who are like them. For farmers looking to make changes, Meeting with, seeing, and learning from other farmers is a crucial part of the process. Through field days, workshops, webinars, on social media, other community-based supports, organizations like Practical Farmers of Iowa, like Minnesota's own Land Stewardship Project and others, and also with help from the University of Minnesota and Iowa State Extension. They have already been supporting farmers to become regenerative for over 30 years. But supportive farming community isn't enough to make these changes widespread. A second crucial piece of the transition puzzle is a supportive community of eaters, us. Farmers need us to care because we all play a crucial role by choosing our food. We can do this by listening, by recognizing the shared goal that we all require safe, plentiful, and resilient food systems. And we can do that by showing that we care for the people who produce our food, as well as the soil, the climate, the water, and the wildlife resources that support us all. And the third crucial piece of the puzzle involves helping farmers better balance their short-term economic needs with sustaining their land and their communities in perpetuity. The way we do this is through infrastructure and policy, as many of the barriers to changing farming practices are systemic. They exist at multiple points along supply chains, within science, within markets, and in government policies. For example, in my research, farmers talk about barriers associated with the lack of alternative crops that have really good genetics, or the lack of markets for those alternative crops. They talk about, why are we taxing conservation land just the same as cropland? They talk about problems with fencing regulations and perverse incentives associated with crop insurance programs, among others. And they don't feel a lot of power in terms of trying to change those things. Can we do this? Yeah, we can do it. And we already have examples of how we're doing it, like those that I just shared with you. And here I want to thank Seth Watkins, Kelly and AJ Blair, Brian and Lisa Sievers as sources of inspiration for the 3 examples of regenerative farms I shared with you today. And I want to thank so many other well-rooted farmers who have been willing to welcome me, my students, my collaborators onto their farms and share their hospitality and expertise. I am forever grateful for their willingness to share their passion, their knowledge, their way of life. And because we have farmers like these, I am very hopeful. And thank you, Westminster Town Hall Forum, the McKnight Foundation, for supporting my visit. It's such an important time to be engaged in conversations like these. And thank you for tuning in and listening today. Each year, each day, as the climate crisis looms closer, please recognize that we have been in a farm crisis for a very long time, with fewer and fewer people out on the land producing our food, stewarding our environment. Again, heaven help us. For the closer, the message I want to leave you with today is, while so many farmers are willing partners, they cannot do it on their own. Any movement that lasts needs to expand beyond a small core network toward widespread support. Farmers need our empathy, our understanding, and our help. Not just mine, but yours too. And that help needs to start with a point where we can agree on. Protecting and regenerating soil is in the best interest of all of us. So again, thank you for tuning in today. But please, I ask you to do your best in your busy and fractured lives. I know they are. To tune in not just once, but 3 times a day. Think about what you eat at meal times, where it came from, who produced it, and say thank you. Thank you, and amen.
Thank you, Dr. Schulte Moore. This is the Westminster Town Hall Forum coming to you from Westminster Presbyterian Church on Nicollet Mall in downtown Minneapolis. I'm Tim Hart Anderson, Senior Minister at Westminster and moderator of the forum. Our speaker today is Lisa Schulte Moore, MacArthur Genius Fellow and a Professor of Natural Resource Ecology and Management at Iowa State University. If you're here in the sanctuary, we invite you to write questions on a card, hold it up for our ushers to collect, please. And if you're watching online, please put your questions into the chat. And while the ushers begin collecting questions, I'd like to thank our broadcast partner, Minnesota Public Radio. NPR will broadcast this spring's forums the week of April 25. Our forum will air each day at noon that week of April 25, including a live broadcast of our April 27th forum right here in the sanctuary. And thanks as well to other media partners, MinnPost and Sahan Journal. Learn more about them at minnpost.com and sahanjournal.com. This season at the Forum on Climate Science and Solutions is co-sponsored by the McKnight Foundation. McKnight's Working Lands strategy centers farmers as the leaders of climate solutions in creating climate-resilient and just food systems. We're pleased to have Tenzin Dolkar with us today. She's a program officer with the McKnight Foundation's Midwest Climate and Energy Program and the lead for their Working Lands strategy. Dolkar will be presenting the audience question to our speakers today. Prior to joining McKnight, Dolkar was a climate advisor to the city of Minneapolis, an agricultural policy advisor to former Governor Mark Dayton, and the state of Minnesota's rail director. And now as Dr. Schulte Moore returns to the pulpit, please join me in welcoming Tenzin Dolkar to present the questions from the audience.
Thank you. So I'm getting some really great questions. Thank you so much for the work that you do. 30% of emissions, greenhouse gas emissions in Iowa is from agriculture sector. How do you scale innovative practices like prairie strips and others that you're working on to reduce that emissions?
Yeah, great question. Thank you for the question. I think, we look at scaling up, there's a few pieces to it. We know that all behavior change starts with just awareness. And then we need to move through change in attitudes, to change in beliefs and change in behaviors. And there are many different interventions that need to happen based on where someone is at in that spectrum. With prairie strips, what I described to you in the talk where we're actively working with farmers to integrate native prairie cover in their crop fields amidst the corn and soybeans. The conversation, initially started with just, awareness. And my teams and I were fortunate to be supported by a host of institutions, including the McKnight Foundation, to conduct research on prairie strips, showing the impacts that even small amounts of prairie could provide when very smartly integrated into a crop field. When we started sharing some of those results, things like, keep 95% more of your soil in the field as opposed to letting it, run off, keeping 77 more of the phosphorus that you paid for in the field, 70% of the nitrogen, doubling the bird biodiversity, tripling the pollinators. When we started sharing some of those data, farmers started coming forward and saying, I really like this idea. It connects with my values, right? And so they were really responding to not just the idea, but the data that we collected. And that's really the awareness piece. And then they started working with us to integrate prairie strips on their farms. And was that ever a process to take a science sort of concept and move it out onto a working farm where somebody's making their living on that farm. That was quite a process. We worked through some ups and downs and made it happen, and the farmers liked it. They liked what they were seeing and its impact on their fields, and they started talking about it. In the combination of the data we collected and the farmers willing to be, talking about the practice positively. Those two things added credibility that really opened up a lot of people's eyes that otherwise would have never been, willing to think about integrating prairie into crop fields and hosting field days so that farmers could show how it's working. And those things in combination then allowed for some policy changes, like a change in the USDA Federal Farm Bill, 2018 Farm Bill, which listed for the first time prairie strips as a conservation reserve eligible practice. That CRP was really important to making the idea not only align with farmers' values, but helping it align with their pocketbooks. And that was really a critical piece in the behavior change.
Thank you. So you mentioned the Farm Bill. Farm Bill is the national farm policy that has so much in it in terms of policies and resources that we need. And so the farmers in Minnesota and farm-led organizations and environmental organizations will be organizing around the 2024 Farm Bill. So the question is, what policies do you think we need to get right in this upcoming Farm Bill? And what do you think is critical that we must have to support innovative practices that could really shift the farming in the Midwest and Minnesota?
Wow, great question. And as a scientist, I have to say that while I've been involved in providing data for the policies, that really is my role, is to provide good data and put it in the hands of people that can do advocacy and make good decisions. That said, as I've looked at the U.S. Corn Belt and I think about, second is it really is a crucial time to get this right. I really want to emphasize that. Like, now is a really crucial time to get this right. We're losing so much every day. And as I look at the Corn Belt, and I made this assessment when I first arrived at Iowa State University in 2003. A lot of professors and extension folks and others, farmers I was talking with, they sort of, had all come to the conclusion that, if there's one thing that we could do to make the Corn Belt better, and I oftentimes think about it this way, is there's a lot of things we could do to make it really great, but what is that next best step? The next best step is we just really need to figure out how to keep the ground covered with continuous living cover throughout the year. We need living plants in our soil throughout the year. That's the one thing. And that's the policy that we need to get right. Allow farmers to integrate in continuous living cover in their operations 365 days a year. It's a hard thing, I know, but it's what we need to do.
So that's a really good way to segue into this next question, which is, how do solutions you advocate for look different on big farms versus small farms? And how many of the corporate farms are practicing these practices that are measurable and they are accountable to?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great question. What was the first part again?
How do they look different on big farm versus small farms?
Yes. Well, we've worked with farms of all sizes. We've got prairie strips on fields that are only 15 acres and fields that are like hundreds of acres. The key thing is that you have to work with the farmer, and sometimes it's not just the farmer, it's the farmer and farmland owner. Sometimes it's a farmer, farmland owner, farm manager, and sometimes it's a farmer, farmland owner, farm manager, and USDA Service Center staff. It can get really complicated. But the key thing is that it has to work for the farming operations, and it takes some time to figure out how to fit that in a way that makes sense for all those parties. But it can be done. We've worked with such a variety, not only in terms of size of farmers, but also their types of different operations. So, some of the first farmers we worked with were organic farmers who were looking at prairie strips to be, they were placing them in their mandatory buffer between themselves and conventional crop fields. they have to plant something there. And they saw the prairie strips as not only sort of a beneficial buffer from the standpoint of, say, pesticide drift, but they were also looking at it as a benefit to, especially on fruit and vegetable farms, the pollinators that their fruit and vegetable crops required. So a real variety of operations. And the largest corporate sector farmers that we've worked with are with Smithfield Foods, and they have prairie strips. They own 4,500 acres in northern Missouri, and they have around 200 acres of prairie strips on that farmland. For me, as a publicly employed scientist, I'm a scientist for the people, so I work with people of all sizes and of all backgrounds. It's part of the joy of what I do, and it's also part of the challenge of what I do, but I work for everyone.
Thank you. So this next question is related to climate resilient. So in the last few years in Minnesota, we have seen extreme rain. Last year we saw extreme drought. So how do you build a farming system that is climate resilient? What opportunities do you foresee for those farmers? And what support do they need as they build this climate resilient farming system?
Yeah. Well, I really think that that soil health is really the key there when we talk about building resilient farming systems, as I kind of detailed some of the reasons why in my initial comments. Soil health is just crucial in terms of being able to weather storms, being able to weather drought, being able to produce nutritious food, right? And soil health also, it matters on the farm. It is in the farmer's best interest to keep their soil and keep their soil healthy, not only for the standpoint of their productivity, but at some point they're gonna pass that soil, that land on, maybe to the next generation within the family, or maybe they'll sell it. And the quality of that soil health, it gets valued in those transactions. And so it's a really key way for us to think about how we can help support each other is with that soil. And I think I detailed some of the ways that we can help encourage soil health in my comments. So.
Thank you. And I think you did in your talk mention soil health could lead to more regenerative farming. So the next question is actually meat. So someone is asking, is it possible to have a truly sustainable meat industry?
Well, I think, great question. And, so much of sustainability, everybody, has a slightly different definition of that, connected with their values. And, your values matter, right? And everybody's, their values matter. And for me, I've made the choice to work with, farmers in Iowa. That is really my focus, and corn and soybean farmers in Iowa. Why? I'm a landscape ecologist. I study big landscapes, and that's what covers the landscape. And, because they cover the landscape, they also have a lot of impacts. And so anything we can do to make their operations more sustainable will have literally ripple effects, not only on their farms, but in their communities downstream. And, I often talk about Iowa agriculture. We produce the most corn in the country, a lot of soybeans. Illinois usually beats us on that statistic. Hogs, eggs, ethanol. I know some of these things are controversial. But, that has literally global ripple effects, right? We not only export our crops and the products from those crops, but we export our agriculture. So if we can make that agriculture an agriculture that's more sustainable, that we're proud of its environmental impacts in addition to its productivity, like literally we will help the planet. And so that's the vision that I'm working toward. Now the meat part. You know, it's really hard in a state like Iowa that we only have, like 3.2 million people. There's just not enough people in Iowa to eat everything that Iowans could produce. It would take like one county, you know, to feed all of Iowa if we were to do so in a really sustainable and regenerative and efficient manner. And so Iowans really do look to export what we produce. And because of a factor of, you know, geography, it means that, you know, Iowa farmers produce things that they can, you know, export to far away and be still healthy and secure, you know, not spoil in that export process. That's where they're at.
So Minnesota, along with Iowa, is #1 in a lot of our farming products. I mean, when it comes to corn, soybean, pork, turkey, we're #1 in turkey. So this question, you know, someone is asking, can you discuss the role of commercial fertilizer in social science, soil health, and the impact on environment and human lives?
Yeah, great question. This is a well-educated audience, I could tell. Not surprised. Yeah, so commercial fertilizer, I'm assuming we're talking about synthetic ammonia here, so made through the Haber-Bosch process from fossil fuels. As we think about climate impacts of agriculture, that nitrogen fertilizer is the elephant. It is the thing, right, that we really need to be thinking about and figuring out how to minimize nitrous oxide production from agricultural lands while also producing sellable crops. We don't have the scientific tools yet. We don't have the management tools yet to do that quite right. I wish we were much further ahead in our science than we are. That said, we do know a lot. And one of the things is, you know, can we replace that synthetic and that commercial fertilizer with a biofertilizer? Right, so based on, you know, that circularity concept that I talked about on one of the farms. Could we potentially replace that synthetic fertilizer from fossil fuels with, say, green ammonia produced through electrical process rather than electrical energy process from the atmosphere rather than from fossil fuels? That would help a lot. Can we figure out how to manage the cropland so that it's not so leaky? Putting the nitrogen fertilizer on the crops at a time when the crops are ready to use it. There's a whole bunch of opportunity for innovation there. And then there's some areas where we just really do need to have that hard conversation about maybe this area shouldn't be in production. And some of those areas that probably shouldn't be in production are low-lying wet areas. And these areas tend to be hot spots for nitrous oxide emissions from the environment. What else can we do there? Can we put in a little prairie there? That's the conversation I'm having with farmers.
Thank you. You're talking about meeting science with what farmers have been doing generations after generations in terms of knowledge on how to grow on their land. So this is the last question for today. As a Midwest leader within the context of changing climate, what is your picture of farming and your vision for farming in the US in 2030 and in 2050?
Oh boy. I've actually written about this. You can go to the web and read about it in the conversation. I love these visioning questions, and you know, in my work, you know, what I feel like I've really been able to bring in my work is that, you know, I'm speaking up with you here today, but what I really do love to do is just listen. And I love to go to field days, and I love to go to farms and just listen to what people are talking about as them seeing their vision. Or we've done research projects where we show pictures and say, tell us what we got right here and tell us what we got wrong. And how would you make this landscape look with your vision? And through that process, I've seen that there's, a lot of consensus in terms of the overall goal. From all different kinds of farmers, from urban residents, that we all want, our farming to be productive and have a lighter impact on the environment. Of course, urban residents care a lot about water and care a lot about climate. And the farmers talk about they need new markets that will allow them to better protect the water. They need new markets that will allow them to reduce, some of the inefficiencies on their farm, is the way they would put it, rather than greenhouse gas reduction. And so in my work, what I try to do is just kind of bridge these different points of view and try to figure out where are those points where we can agree and we can start working together. And there are those points where we can start working together. Prairie strips, the work my teams and I have done there, we've shown that that's one of the points where we can work together. Now, can we expand on, say, prairie strips being 10% of the landscape to, say, 25% of the landscape? We can do that, and we know there are ways that we can do that. But there are also barriers to doing that. The fact that there's not many young people in rural areas anymore that want to, do grass-based or have the capital to do grass-based livestock production. We asked about the animals, like grass-based livestock production is a really important part of the puzzle to getting this right. We need to be able to create energy sources based on perennial herbaceous native plant cover so that farmers have another market that they can access with that prairie strip vegetation. And I'm really hopeful because we're working with groups like Practical Farmers of Iowa, like Baseline Alternative Energy, to make those visions a reality. Is there more we need to do? Could policy change, can infrastructure change help? Yes, it can. And so I guess the last thing I ask you is, again, let's continue this conversation. So it's not just today, right? I encourage you to connect to your local community groups that also work with farmers, that are also trying to bridge the rural and urban divide, and better support farmers and better advocate policies that make sense in that place. And those local groups are best poised to be able to provide that hand that the farmers need to advocate for the policies that will actually help them. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa Schulte Moore, for this provocative and stimulating presentation on the needs to sustain our rural communities and farming, and as a way to combat climate change. We're grateful for your perspective, and those of us who are watching basketball, the Sweet 16, Iowa State plays tonight. So yeah. Thank you all. Well, April 6th, just a couple weeks from now, we're back in this room for the next Town Hall Forum with Elizabeth Colbert. We'll see you then. Thank you for your support, and thanks again to Lisa Schulte Moore and Tenzin Zolkar. Basketball fan, but we got it in there.
Yeah, exactly. We're going to be watching tonight, that's for sure. Yeah, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Yeah, really great to meet you.
Thanks so much. You've got stuff in my office.